Hey guys, Kerry Werner here from the Kona Maxxis Shimano team. It is Wednesday after GoCross, and we're already up here in Rochester. We drove up on Monday, settled in nicely here at the August, got to hang out on the lake yesterday and have some fun. Got to see Spencer squidding around on a stand-up paddleboard, which was his first time. The water was a little too choppy. One, two, three. Like I said, it's Wednesday, but before we move on to Rochester CX, which is coming up this weekend, I wanted to step back and talk about last weekend's GoCross, do a little race recap for Saturday and Sunday. Last weekend I had a proper crew, get a bunch of good footage, so I think I can throw together a decent enough race recap. I should start off by saying this year a lot more people showed up to GoCross than they had in years past. The main reason being, coming off a pandemic year, there was new stipulations on UCI points from the UCI. For GoCross, everybody that didn't race last year got to keep 2019 UCI points through GoCross weekend, and then the Tuesday after GoCross, everything reset. If you wanted to have points coming into Rochester, you either would have had to do World Championships last year because those points stayed, or you would have had to get points at Rochester, at least for us in the US. Everybody was fighting for a top 10 spot so they could get at least a point so that they didn't have to have their names drawn out of a hat. Let's get into the race. So Saturday, GoCross has a uniquely downhill start, which is interesting. With that said, I was stoked that there were no problems off the start. We got going, and I think Stevie took up pacemaking the first lap. Wasn't anything notable that happened at the beginning of this race, except for the fact that Curtis was 4 or 5 wheels back and didn't decide to stick his head out in the wind until about 3 laps to go, but we'll get to that. Off the start, Stevie took up pacemaking, and then I think I took a turn at the front for a little while. Vandenham got to the front and did the lion's share of the pacemaking on day one. Another notable thing about Saturday was that it was hot, and it was the first race of the year. So like sometimes that first race effort alone is enough to like shock the system, basically explode come the end of the race. But then when you add the heat on top of that, it's like it can be a recipe for disaster. So keep that in mind as I get towards the end of this race. Big crux move happened with about 2.5 laps to go. Curtis finally decided to make some noise, and he got on the front and pushed the pace a little bit in sections where he pushed the pace in 2019. So I was kind of ready for that. I got stuck behind Andrew Strohmeyer's wheels. The gap opened, and Andrew wasn't closing it down as fast as I would have liked. So with 2.5 laps to go, I put in a pretty big dig on the backside to make the bridge, and from there Curtis and I connected and kind of rolled with that 2 laps to go together. I think that effort, like I said, really twisted the screws on a bunch of guys and kind of compounded the efforts earlier in the race and made the heat a really big factor. The field kind of detonated behind us, which was kind of nice because it was just Curtis and I fighting for the top step. So Curtis pulled the whole 2 laps to go and into 1 lap to go as well. Coming into the back quarter of the lap, this is the crucial part of the course. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for separation on this course. It's a very punchy, not a lot of drawn out power sections, and the technical sections weren't technical enough to cause separation. So we came into the back part of the course where everything happened in 2019, so in the back of my head I'm thinking about that. And there's a gravel flat into one of the final paved uphill climbs, and Curtis sat up on that after making the initial attack and leading the last lap and a half. And as soon as he sat up, I put in an all-out effort dig. I kind of caught him off guard by doing that. I think I opened up a bit of a gap, like 1 or 2 seconds. It was quite a few bike lengths. I came up over that paved bike path rise with a bit of a gap into a hairpin. Unfortunately, I pulled out of my pedal as I must have tweaked my bike a little too hard towards the top. And by the time I got clipped back in and hit the hairpin, I had Curtis breathing down my neck again. From that point, I was just focused on getting to the start the finish straight first. So I kept the power on and was really guarding my inside lines. Again, making sure I hit the finish straight first, because while it was long, it was downhill. Plus, I'd already put that dig in, so I was dying. So we did the last hillside of turns and dropped into the finish straight, and I managed to hold him off and be first wheel onto the straight, which set me up to sprint. It's a slight right-hand turn into the finish line. I also knew being first wheel meant I could take inside, so Curtis had to come around me on the outside. I jumped immediately and had good legs and good speed, but about halfway through the finish sprint, I ran out of gear, and being gassed, I just couldn't keep that RPM up out of the saddle, so I sat down, and I think that was my demise. Curtis came barreling by me on the outside, and it came down to a bike throw, and he got me by about half a wheel length. I was gutted. Being my hometown race, I wanted to kick the thing off with a win, and I had a great opportunity there to do it, but obviously I missed it. Looking back, some things I would have changed. Obviously, I wish I wouldn't have pulled out of my pedal just before the finish straight, but coming into the finish straight, might have been nice to have a bit more gear. I had a 42 chainring up front and an 11 in the back, and I just spun that thing out. I think Curtis also had a 42 chainring up front. He also had the 10-tooth cog in the back, so he had a bit more to give. The other thing that a few people told me afterwards that didn't even cross my mind during the race was I could have straightened my line up out of that sweeping right-hander into the finish a bit instead of hugging the fence equidistance. It would have shortened my trip to the finish line out of that curve and maybe caused some hesitancy on Curtis's part to continue to come around me. Curtis is a really good sprinter, better sprinter than me, and so I'm not taking away from the fact that he could have just beat me in the sprint, but just some things to think about down the road. That was day one, GoCross, a little gutted, missed out on the win in front of my hometown crowd, but moving into Sunday, I had another opportunity. So that was day one race recap. Thanks for watching, and up next is GoCross day 2.